Rich people moments that show just how out of touch they can be. I worked at a restaurant with this guy in his early 20s. Total trust fund baby. His parents told him if he didn't get a job, they'd cut him off from everything. Phone, car, apartment, school, credit card, you name it. One day, we were talking about summer plans. I said I was going to visit my mom for the weekend up north. Another guy was camping, and someone else was helping his brother move. This guy chimes in, "You guys have no idea what vacation is. I'm taking my girlfriend to Spain for 2 weeks. Then a few days in Italy." I asked him where he was working when he came back. He looked at me confused. He didn't get that taking a 3-week vacation right after starting a job wasn't exactly normal, especially during our busiest season. He didn't last long. I worked at a car dealership once, and the owner pulled up in a $250,000 Porsche GT3. I told him I loved the car and hoped to own one someday. He looked at me like I was crazy and said, "What do you mean? We sell those right here." He genuinely didn't understand that his employees couldn't afford the cars they were selling. In college, I worked cleaning and tutoring for wealthy families. Some highlights? It's so much more convenient to have a sauna in your house. We ordered our wallpaper from Europe. It's the only way to go. I bought the empty lot next to ours so we won't have neighbors. And my favorite, a rich kid says, "I can't find any babysitting jobs. All the ones left are taken by the 1%. The parent replies, "Honey, you're the 1%. I once overheard a family in Boston complaining about the lack of space in their condo. They were so cramped that they had to buy a second one. Why? Because they had run out of room to store their Persian rugs. I dated a rich guy once who loved my authenticity. He'd pick me up in his dad's vintage collector cars, and we'd go to record stores. One day, I showed up in my grandpa's old Ford F-150. He asked me, "Why do you drive that thing?" I shrugged and said, "Because I'm poor." He just stared at me. "No, you're not," he said. I guess my truck didn't fit his hipster aesthetic. I was venting to a schoolmate about not being able to afford a car. She said, "Why don't you just ask your mom?" My brain literally stopped for a second. Why hadn't I thought of that? Another one. Money's been tight, so we have to wait a couple more weeks before we break ground on the new air-conditioned stable for the horses. My boss, an attorney, was helping a client with her financial statement for a divorce. The client realized she forgot to include her student loans. Laughing, she said, "I can't believe I forgot that." My boss, in a bright and sunny voice, replied, "I sometimes forget I own a boat." The client and I exchanged a silent, shared look of disbelief. "It's only $1,000, he says. "Okay, then give it to me." "How often do you go sailing?" asked the guy who knew I was struggling financially. And finally, "Where do you summer?" Again, asked by someone who had no clue what it was like to live paycheck to paycheck.